There is a coup d'etat underway in Venezuela sponsored by the United Corporations of America, aka the United States of America. Now, I like to keep it very real with the audience. So when I am not an expert on something, I like to say, this is not something I'm an expert on. I do not know the ins and outs of the Venezuelan government, the protests. I don't know much about Maduro. I don't know much. I have reached out to Ben Norton, who I think is a great independent journalist who's done a lot on this, to see if he could do an interview. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. Right now in Venezuela, as President Trump announced today that he is behind an unelected opposition leader who now is declaring himself president. This is from Ben Norton a few weeks ago, but obviously updated today. U.S. backs coup in oil-rich Venezuela. Right-wing opposition plans mass privatization and hyper-capitalism. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Because the United States was responsible for Soviet Union's downfall. And what came in the Soviet Union's downfall? Mass privatization and hyper-capitalism. Go ask the people in Russia today. How's their economy? The U.S. has effectively declared a coup in Venezuela. Trump recognized unelected right-wing opposition leader Juan Guaido as new president, who plans mass privatization and neoliberal capitalist policies. The United States has effectively declared a coup d'etat in Venezuela from abroad. Trump announced on January 23rd that the U.S. recognizes the unelected, illegitimate right-wing opposition leader Juan Guaido as the supposed new interim president of Venezuela's supposed new government. The U.S. also hinted at violence in Venezuela. During a background briefing after Trump's declaration, journalist Dan Cohen heard a U.S. official declare that if Maduro government responds with any violence, Maduro being the actual elected leader in Venezuela, if Maduro responds with any violence, quote, they have no immediate future, they have no immediate livelihood, one way or another, they have their days counted. Trump administration officials added, quote, when we say all our options are on the table, all our options are on the table. Let's hope Maduro and his cronies see the magnitude of the message. Oh, gotta love Donald Trump talking about cronyism. Canada's Liberal government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Brazil's newly elected far-right leader Jair Bolsonaro, and the overtly pro-U.S. Organization of American States and its Secretary General Luis Almagro have joined Trump in endorsing this coup in Venezuela. These governments and an obescent corporate media have referred to Venezuela's actual president, Nicolas Maduro, as an authoritarian dictator. What they failed to mention is that Venezuela still has regular elections, but the U.S.-backed right-wing opposition, which is notoriously disunited and incompetent, has chosen to boycott these elections, preferring to call for foreign-backed military coups instead. One of the only elected officials in the U.S. who has spoken out against the coup is left-wing California Congressman Ro Khanna. Other progressives and anti-Trump U.S. politicians, including self-declared democratic socialists, have remained silent on Trump's effective declaration of a coup in Latin America. I do believe he might be referring to Bernie Sanders as well as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. While supporters of regime change in Venezuela insist this blatantly undemocratic move is necessary to defend democracy, make no mistake, the upheaval is clearly not motivated by resistance to authoritarianism. Venezuela, which has the world's largest oil reserves, has long been a target of U.S. aggression. In 2002, the U.S. supported a military coup that briefly ousted democratically elected President Hugo Chavez and replaced him with the right-wing oligarch Pedro Carmona. U.S. intervention, including crippling economic sanctions, has only continued since. So I'm not going to read the rest because you get the drill. And again, I've reached out to Benjamin Norton to see if he could do an interview on this, because this is definitely his expertise. I'll also reach out to Abby Martin, who has done great reporting in Venezuela at grave risk to her and her crew. You know, I find it so remarkable that for the last there's the bigger picture of U.S. coup and regime change. We've done this in Iran with Mossadegh in the 1950s. We've tried to do this in Cuba. We've done this in many, many, many countries. where the United States, oh, we don't like this dictator because he's not friendly to our business interests. They're not giving us all the oil that we so choose. They're not bending over for the United States of America. So we're going to prop up the opposition, which is for democracy. The only problem is the opposition isn't for democracy. The opposition is just as brutal, just as vile, just as corrupt as the very leaders we are toppling. The only difference is the very leaders we are toppling, whether they are brutal dictators or whether they're great, are democratically elected leaders. But the United States of America likes to pretend, oh, we're just doing this for human rights. We're getting rid of Maduro because he's a brutal dictator, and us, the United States, the North Star of humanity, is there to cheerlead a unelected, illegal leader. So when you hear, for the last 3 years, the corporate media military industrial complex, say it with me, the corporate media military industrial complex, when you hear them screaming, duck, get under your desk, the Russian trolls are coming for our democracy, right? When you hear them screaming and hollering about our holy democracy is under attack because there's fake Facebook pages on Russia, and the Russians are hacking Hillary Clinton's Crown Prince, John Podesta, and the Russians are coming for, your McDonald's and your Taco Bell and your Sunday football, and the Russians are behind Black Lives Matter and Standing Rock and Fight for 15 and, Bernie Sanders' underwear choices. When you hear this propaganda about Russia, don't get me wrong. All right, Russia, they tried to infiltrate the election. They put out fake Facebook pages. I don't endorse that. No good. But when you hear the frauds in the media, the frauds in Congress, including on the Democratic side, they're so concerned about democracy. How much are you hearing a loud chorus of people screaming that the United States is essentially, when the United States approves a coup d'etat, that's the final step to a coup d'etat. So Trump sitting there playing kingmaker and Mike Pence doing a video endorsing this coup d'etat in Venezuela means the coup d'etat is going to be complete. So on one hand, we're so worried about a foreign government interfering in our elections and the corporate media. This is the gravest threat to democracy since the Civil War, Russia. This is the gravest threat to democracy since Watergate. This is the gravest threat to democracy since the Revolutionary War, for God's sakes, the Russian trolls. But the United States backing a coup d'etat in Venezuela? Oh, that's just Tuesday. I mean, it's unbelievable. And as Benjamin Norton has so described, as Abby Martin has done amazing reporting in Venezuela, I very much apologize if something changed before I went live. And please, if something has changed, I looked at Bernie Sanders' social media today. I haven't seen anything on this Venezuelan coup. I looked at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's social media. I haven't seen anything. Certainly haven't seen anything from Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, Joe Biden. I did see something from Andrew Gillum, the one-time Florida governor's candidate, endorsing this coup d'etat. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has 2.6 million views. I happen to like her a lot. Don't have a lot of, I think she's done great so far, but we got to call out progressives too if they're not doing the right thing. This is why the United States of America has honestly become worse than the British Empire we were born on. Us fighting the British to be free? Well, are we really much better than the British oppressors that this country was born on? This is not about whether Maduro is a brutal dictator or not. That's irrelevant to this discussion. Just because somebody is a brutal dictator doesn't mean the United States of America has a role or a right to topple the legal elected leader in that country. And that doesn't mean I'm not sympathetic if there is a brutal dictator in power in Venezuela or anywhere else. But the United States does not have the right to a coup d'etat. Elections are how you get rid of awful, awful leaders. Now, it's a different story if this was Adolf Hitler. And this was, a man taking millions and millions of people to camps to die. But we're not talking about that. You're right, Hank. It's oil, baby. Biggest oil reserve in the world. And Trump has made it absolutely clear this is the United States of oil. This is the United Corporations of America and the United States of oil. That's it. Where is the progressive movement? Frankly, keeping it real, Bernard Sanders, where the hell are you, Bernard? If you want to lead, if you want to run for president again, which you're going to, you should be one of the leading people speaking out against this regime change. The United States cannot sit there hollering against the evil Russian boogeyman and threats to our democracy, and Trump is a fascist, and Trump is awful, and we need to renormalize society in America and get rid of Trump. But we turn a blind eye to a coup d'etat in Venezuela so we could get their oil? You cannot be a progressive and do that. So maybe they're waiting to see how things play out, but, what do you need to see? There's literally a coup underway. You have the unelected opposition leader declaring himself president. The U.S., Justin Trudeau, who besides the good looks is kind of equal, not so great. Go ask the people in Canada how they feel about Justin Trudeau. Ramming fracked gas pipelines through Native American reservations in British Columbia, in addition to other terrible things he's been doing. What really is a problem here is we always say about the Republican Party doesn't care about anything until it affects them, right? So Rex Tillerson, he's pro-fracking until a fracked gas pipeline was coming near his house. Then he joined a lawsuit to stop it. This was Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Conservatives, they don't care about school shootings until one of their kids gets shot up in a school. So we know this about Republicans. But the Democratic Party, what is this? You're railing about Trump, who's awful, and we can't normalize Trump, and he's the next coming of the Third Reich, and he's awful and terrible, and we need to bring back democracy. Hashtag President Pelosi, we were seeing last week. Don't get me wrong, I think Trump is awful, but you can't, in one breath, be, hollering and hooting about the Russian boogeyman and democracy, and then just let regime change after regime change. And you know what? Right now, the only Democrat speaking out against this is Ro Khanna. In fairness, I didn't look at Tulsi Gabbard today. Based on her worldview, my assumption is she's also against this coup d'etat in Venezuela. But there's another element here. See, the corporate media is essentially the stenographers for the government. So the government creates the narrative. And the corporate media, it's like a relay. Government creates the narrative, corporate media carries their water. But who is the United States to say how the Venezuelan people feel? Because I saw a tweet from an actual Venezuelan reporter today that the actual government, the governmental body that this unelected leader that just declared himself president, so he is the president of the governmental body, like their Congress. I might be explaining it wrong, but basically this unelected leader who has now declared himself president with the United States backing, he is part of a body that's disapproval rate is at 70%. So, yes, there's protests against Maduro, but the United States and this corporate narrative that all of Venezuela wants Maduro out just isn't true. And that's not someone defending Maduro. That's just defending democracy and elections.